get a little fancier with our DOM manipulation. Changing the heading doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. That should still be the heading. This is a user directory, right? So we have a field that takes the username, but we just changed the heading. That's kind of useless. Let's make a new div down here underneath the form, but before our script tag, where we're going to actually put the information. So I'm going to make a div called users. So here's another little trick. Using emit, which is that abbreviation expansion thing. You could also just say like hash users, expand, and it turns into div ID users. Pretty groovy, saves you a lot of typing. And I'm not going to put a darn thing in there. I'm just going to update that when we submit. So we can very quickly just make it change that instead of changing the heading, right? We know how to do that. Instead of heading equals document.querySelector h1, we'll change the query selector to hash users. And what's a better name for that? Let's call it users. Users.textContent equals username. How's that sound? Should be all we have to do. Refresh. Now, of course, the div isn't visible on the page at all because it's empty, right? So let's add a name, and there it is, right there at the bottom. Cool. Now, what if I wanted to, instead of just replacing the name every time, I wanted to just keep adding new people? What could we change to make it sort of append the name instead of replacing the entire contents? What's one way you can think of doing that? So, what's that? A list? Yeah, that'd be a fancy way of doing that. We're going to do that. But we're going to wait a minute before we do it that way. Right now, it would be acceptable if we just kept the text that was already there and added new text. Are you starting to say something?
Is there like a dot append?
There is. That's also a little too fancy right now. Yeah, just manipulate the string. So how could we do that? Concatenate it? Why don't we try that? So instead of users text content just equals username, what if we did plus equals? Have you used plus equals before in other languages? Basically the same thing as saying equals users.textContent plus the new thing, right? We can just use plus equals. Let's see what that does. TJ. Maddie, do you do Y or IE? Maddie. TJM Addy. Cool. There's no space or anything between right now. That's kind of unfortunate, isn't it? We could at least throw an empty string in there. Plus equals empty string plus username. Then we at least get a space between them. Well, if that lot of good that did us, I didn't refresh the page. Did I refresh the page? I think I did.
Wait, don't you show space?
Well, that wasn't enough. It's smashing that. Yeah. Oh, I didn't put a space in there. That's an empty string. There's supposed to be a space in there. Yeah. You know something else that's really annoying me? Backspace. It's not clearing it out each time. Super annoying. How can we fix that? All right. So we know how to get the value of this thing, right? Form username value. We could set it. What if we just set it back to empty string? Form.username.value equals empty string. How about that? Will he is. Let's see, is it? Okay, I thought so. Jack, right? Yeah. Yay, I don't have to backspace every time. Much better. Something else that annoys me, though, I load the page. I just want to start typing. Aw, cuss. Can't do it. I have to click on this thing first like some kind of animal. Unacceptable user experience. I do not like. How can I fix that? Anybody know? What happens when I click on it? What do we call that? Do you know what that's called? That input now has the focus. That's right. You know how to set the focus? Once you have the element, you could say dot focus parens. But you can also set an element to automatically focus when the page loads. Anybody know how to do that? Anybody done it before? It's really easy. You can just add an attribute to that input called autofocus. And it's a Boolean input. You don't have to put a value there. I mean, an attribute, a Boolean attribute. Now when I refresh the page, I can just start typing. Life is good. Yeah. Good user experience, relatively speaking. So that seems like enough for a commit already. We learned a couple new tricks. In fact, I kind of wish I'd committed a little earlier, but oh well. So I did git add to move my changes from the working directory to the staging area or the index. Now I run git commit to move them from the staging area to the actual repository. I did too many things in one commit, dang it, and it's ticking me off. Add multiple names, clearing the input in between. Clearing the input each time. How's that? And when I push, it moves from the repository locally and syncs it with my remote.